James Gomez, stay where you are and keep your hands visible while we review these records.
My hands are right here. Customer asks managers for help with online access all the time.
Your phone number was linked to a customer profile.
This is James Gomes, a bank branch manager who built a paper trail he thought would protect him. Every document in that trail is a forgery, and federal agents have all of them.
And transfers move from those accounts into accounts under your
I
control.
need to see exactly what records you're relying on before I respond to them.
He had spent 4 years convincing himself the email chain was real, that every reply signed "Regards, Edwin" buried the theft a little deeper. It did not. Within 72 hours of the indictment, federal investigators in the District of New Jersey would reconstruct every login, every IP address, every transfer that drained the customer's accounts. $208,938.68 to the penny. And the man whose name was signing those emails, he had been dead since April 5th, 2020. Before we go any further, I have to ask you something. Have you ever wondered how much access the person managing your bank account actually has? Not the teller, the manager, the one whose signature unlocks the doors in the morning and locks them at night. Drop a comment with what you think the answer is, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how dangerous the real answer can be. And if you're new to the channel, hit subscribe. We cover cases the financial press buries under a paragraph on page 9. James Manuel Gomez was born on August 19, 1981, in a third-floor walk-up on Lafayette Street in the ironbound section of Newark, New Jersey. His father, Manuel Gomez, was 31 years old that summer, a fisherman from São Miguel in the Azores, who had cleaned cod at the Iberia Peninsula Foods plant on Wilson Avenue for 9 years. His mother, Conceição, worked as a seamstress for a uniform contractor on Ferry Street. They had arrived in Newark in 1972 with 2 suitcases, a stack of family photographs, and the address of a cousin who would let them sleep on a kitchen floor for 43 nights before they could afford a room of their own. James was the second of 3 children. His older sister, Liliana, became a registered nurse. His younger brother, Tiago, joined the Newark Fire Department in 2007. James was the one his parents pinned the financial dreams on. He could read at 4. He could calculate compound interest on a paper napkin at 9. When the family went to the Banco Espirito Santo branch on Ferry Street to wire money home to the islands, his father would stand him on a folding chair and let him fill out the slips himself. By 1995, the family had moved into a narrow brick row house on Houston Street, 3 doors down from the Sport Club Portuguese. James attended Eastside High School on Van Buren Street, graduating in 1999 with honors and a partial scholarship to Rutgers University in Newark. He commuted by bus. He worked weekends as a stocker at the ShopRite on Springfield Avenue, and weeknights as a busboy at the Iberia Tavern. He graduated in 2003 with a B.S. in finance and a certificate in international banking. The professors who wrote his recommendation letters used identical phrases: disciplined, studious, an asset to any institution lucky enough to hire him. His first job out of Rutgers was at a Sovereign Bank branch on Bloomfield Avenue in Bloomfield, New Jersey, starting as a personal banker in September 2003 at a salary of $41,000. His performance reviews from that first year survive in the discovery file. Excellent rapport with multilingual customers. Consistently exceeds cross-sell targets. Recommend for promotion track. By 2006, he was an assistant branch manager at the Sovereign location on Ferry Street, 3 blocks from where he had grown up. The grandmothers who had brought him hard candies as a child now lined up at his window to roll over their certificates of deposit. In 2008, during the financial crisis, he moved to TD Bank as a branch manager in Kearney. In 2012, he made the jump that would define the rest of his career. An international institution headquartered in São Paulo, with a New York branch on Madison Avenue, hired him to run their private banking floor for Portuguese and Brazilian clients living in the tri-state area. The position came with a corner office on the 11th floor, a leased BMW 328i, and a starting salary of $142,000 before bonuses. He married Patricia Almeida, a dental hygienist from Elizabeth, on May 24, 2008, at the Sport Club Portuguese Wedding Hall. The reception ran until 3 in the morning. They bought a colonial in Kearney in 2010 with a finished basement and a brick patio. Their daughter Beatrice was born in 2011. Their son Diogo in 2014. James drove from Kearney to the Lincoln Tunnel 5 mornings a week, parked in a monthly garage on East 46th Street, and walked the 6 blocks to the Madison Avenue Tower. His colleagues described him in the same vocabulary his Rutgers professors had used: disciplined, studious, the kind of branch manager who arrived 20 minutes early and stayed 20 minutes late. By 2019, he had been with the bank for 7 years. He oversaw 46 accounts personally. Some of them held more than $2 million. His clients trusted him because he spoke their language, knew their neighborhoods, and shook hands like the son of a fisherman who had not forgotten where he came from. To understand what James Gomes did, you have to understand what a private banking branch manager at an international institution actually has the power to do. The position is not what most depositors imagine. A branch manager is not a customer service supervisor. A branch manager is a custodian of access. At Gomes's institution, every customer account was tied to 3 identifiers: a username for the online banking platform, a primary phone number for 2-factor authentication, and an email address on file for transaction confirmations and statement delivery. All 3 identifiers could be modified by a customer in person at the branch with 2 forms of identification and a signed authorization form, or they could be modified directly in the bank's internal system by a branch manager on behalf of a customer after a phone call or email exchange that the manager would document in a service note. That second pathway existed for a reason. The bank's customer base included elderly Portuguese-speaking depositors who did not own smartphones, who could not navigate password reset workflows in English, and who had been doing business by handshake for 50 years. The bank trusted its branch managers to act as the human bridge between an analog client base and a digital infrastructure. Compliance training emphasized one principle above all others. The manager's role was to facilitate, not to substitute. The customer's voice, the customer's wishes, the customer's authorization had to come from the customer. A branch manager had access to a separate authentication console called CRM Override. From that console, he could add a phone number to any account. He could enroll any account in the online banking platform. He could trigger a password reset and have the new credentials sent to any registered email on file. Each of those actions generated an audit log entry. Each entry was reviewed at the end of the business quarter by a compliance officer in São Paulo. The reviews focused on patterns, volume, anomalies. A single override here or there, properly documented with a service note, attracted no attention. The institution's vulnerability was not technological, it was architectural. The system assumed that a branch manager who exercised override authority was doing so on behalf of the customer, because the alternative, that a manager would impersonate a customer to his own bank, was treated as so unthinkable that no real-time check existed to catch it. The audit was a rear-view mirror. By the time it reviewed a quarter, the quarter was already gone. That assumption held for 99.9% of branch managers across the bank's global network. Customers were safer than they realized. They were also more exposed than they could have possibly understood. The wall between their money and a dishonest manager was a single sheet of paper. The signature of trust. The customer's name in the federal indictment is redacted, replaced with the initials EB. Court filings indicate he was a Portuguese-Brazilian businessman in his early 70s who had immigrated to the United States in 1981, made his fortune importing wine and cheese through a warehouse in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and retired in 2017 to a condominium in Fort Lee with a view of the George Washington Bridge. He was a widower. He had no children. His closest living relative was a nephew in Curitiba, whom he saw once every 3 years. He had been a private banking client of the institution since 2014. James Gomes had been his branch manager since 2016. On the morning of January 8, 2020, at 9:47 a.m. Eastern, James Gomes logged into the CRM Override console from his 11th floor workstation. He pulled up EB's account. He navigated to the contact information panel. He replaced the customer's registered cell phone number, a 201 area code line that the customer had carried since 2003, with a 917 area code number. The new number was a prepaid line Gomes had activated 3 days earlier at a Boost Mobile kiosk on 34th Street, registered to a name that did not exist. Then he enrolled the account in the online banking platform. He triggered a password reset. The temporary credentials were emailed, per protocol, to the email address on file. Then he opened a Chrome browser in incognito mode. He logged in. He set a new password. The investigation would later determine that the entire sequence, from login to fully owned digital control of the customer's accounts, took 11 minutes and 40 seconds. For the next 6 weeks, he watched. He logged into the account every 2 or 3 days, from his office IP address, sometimes from the wireless network at the Starbucks on the corner of 48th and Madison, once from his home in Kearney at 11:23 p.m. on a Wednesday. He looked. He did nothing. He was learning the rhythm of the account. When dividends posted, when the customer typically reviewed his statements, whether anyone else was looking. In late February, satisfied that no one was looking, he began the second phase. He created an email address through ProtonMail. The address used the customer's full name. He registered it from a public Wi-Fi network at the Hoboken Path station. Then, on the afternoon of February 27th, he opened his official bank email account on his work laptop, composed a message to the ProtonMail address, and pressed send. The message asked the customer to confirm his interest in moving funds to a new investment vehicle. 43 minutes later, the ProtonMail account replied. The reply was signed Edwin. It said, in lightly accented English, that yes, he wanted to proceed. It was the first message in what would become a two-way correspondence spanning 47 emails over the next 10 weeks. Every message from Edwin was sent from a device James Gomes controlled. Every message from James Gomes was logged on the bank's compliance server, exactly as protocol required. The first transfer left the customer's accounts on March 11, 2020, $18,000, routed from the customer's primary checking to a personal Chase account in Gomes's name. The supporting documentation in the bank's compliance log included the email chain. The customer requesting the transfer. Gomes confirming the transfer. The customer thanking him. All of it fictional. All of it generated by one man at one keyboard pretending to be two. The transfers escalated. On March 23rd, 47,000. On March 30th, 61,500. On April 2nd, 58,400. Each one preceded by an email exchange between James Gomes and a man who was not the customer, written by James Gomes, replied to by James Gomes, archived by the bank's compliance server as proof of authorization. The COVID-19 pandemic had reached New York City. The branch had transitioned to a hybrid model. Gomes was working from his home office in Kearney 3 days a week. Compliance was understaffed and overwhelmed. The quarterly audit was running 6 weeks behind. The window of opportunity was wide open. We're about to get into how this scheme collapsed, and I'll be honest with you, the timing of what comes next is the most disturbing detail in this entire case. If you've made it this far, hit subscribe before we go further. This channel covers financial crimes the major outlets give a single paragraph to, and then forget. Drop a comment letting me know which state you're watching from. The next 2 minutes are going to change how you read this story. The customer died on April 5th, 2020, Sunday morning, alone in his condominium in Fort Lee, of a coronary event unrelated to the virus that was killing thousands of people across the river that same week. He was found by a building superintendent on Tuesday afternoon, April 7th, after a neighbor noticed 2 days of unanswered knocks. The medical examiner placed time of death somewhere between 5 and 7 a.m. on Sunday the 5th. His nephew in Curitiba was notified by the Portuguese consulate on April 9th. The nephew, who had not seen his uncle since 2018, did what families do when an isolated relative dies. He waited. He grieved long distance. He began the slow process of trying to figure out what his uncle owned, what bills needed paying, where the accounts were. International borders were closed. Brazilian travel to the United States was suspended. The nephew could not fly to New York to handle his uncle's affairs in person. He hired a New Jersey probate attorney remotely. The attorney filed for letters of administration in Bergen County in late April. The court was running on emergency hours. The pandemic backlog was immediate. The full appointment as administrator of the estate would not be granted until August. For James Gomes, the death of his customer was a logistical problem he had not prepared for. He learned about it on Monday morning, April 6th, when a junior associate at the New York branch flagged the local Fort Lee News Bulletin about an unattended death in a high-rise. The associate had recognized the address from the customer's file. He sent a polite email to Gomez asking if he should escalate to relationship management for an account freeze pending verification. Gomez replied within 4 minutes. He thanked the associate. He said he would handle it personally. He said he would contact the family and confirm before any account action was taken. He did not contact the family. He did not freeze the accounts. Instead, he opened the Proton Mail account at 11:18 a.m. that same Monday and wrote a new email to himself. The message, signed Edwin, apologized for being slow to respond over the weekend, mentioned a brief hospitalization, and authorized one final transfer of $24,500 to rebalance the portfolio before recovery. Gomes, from his official bank account, replied with warm wishes for a swift recovery. He processed the transfer at 11:34 a.m. The customer had been dead for 30 hours. Over the next 3 weeks, he authorized 2 additional transfers from the same email choreography. He drained the customer's investment account on April 17th. He drained the customer's secondary savings on April 24th. He composed 3 more emails from Edwin. He replied to all of them from his official bank account. The compliance server received and archived every message exactly as if they were a real conversation between a banker and his client. The final tally on the operation, according to the federal indictment, was $208,938.68. The man whose name authorized the last 6 transfers had been dead for the duration of every single one of them. The unraveling did not happen suddenly. It happened the way most financial frauds end, quietly, methodically, through the slow grind of a paperwork system that eventually catches up to itself. In late August 2020, the Bergen County Surrogates Court issued the formal letters of administration to the nephew's appointed New Jersey probate attorney. The attorney, whose name in court filings is given as Andrew Russo of a Hackensack firm, began the standard process of contacting every financial institution where the deceased was known to hold assets. He sent a written request to the bank's New York branch on September 4th, asking for full account balances as of April 5th, 2020, and a complete transaction history for the 6 months preceding death. The request was routed, per institutional protocol, away from the branch manager who had handled the customer's accounts and over to the bank's estate administration unit in Miami. A junior estate specialist named Carolina Pereira opened the file on September 11th. She pulled the account histories. She pulled the email correspondence archive. She pulled the CRM override logs. What Carolina Pereira saw on her screen did not match. The transaction history showed 9 substantial transfers out of the deceased's accounts between March 11th and April 28th. 4 of those transfers had occurred after the date of death on April 5th. The email archive showed corresponding authorization emails from the customer for every single transfer. Several of those emails had been sent after the customer was already dead. She flagged the file. The file was escalated within 48 hours to the bank's internal fraud investigations unit. The investigations unit opened a parallel review of every account James Gomes had touched in the previous 24 months. They pulled IP addresses from the email server logs. They cross-referenced the IP addresses against the bank's employee VPN logs. They identified the Proton Mail account. They subpoenaed Proton Mail in Switzerland. The registration logs traced back to a public Wi-Fi network at a New Jersey PATH station, the same network James Gomes's bank-issued phone had connected to on the date of registration. The internal investigation was complete by the second week of November 2020. The findings were referred to federal authorities. The Money Laundering and Asset Recovery section of the Department of Justice, working with the United States Attorney's Office for the District of New Jersey, opened a criminal investigation in December. The case sat under seal for 2.5 years while prosecutors built it. In the months while the case sat sealed, James Gomes continued to go to work. He continued to manage 46 accounts. He continued to drive in from Kearney on the same morning schedule, to park in the same garage on 46th Street, to wave good morning to the same security guard in the marble lobby. His evaluations from 2021 and 2022 used the same vocabulary they had always used: disciplined, studious. The kind of branch manager who arrived 20 minutes early and stayed 20 minutes late. The smoking gun, when prosecutors finally presented it, was not the IP addresses or the override logs or the transfer slips. It was the email chain itself. 47 messages over 10 weeks. Every one of them composed, sent, received, and archived by the same human being at the same keyboard. A conversation between a man and his own invented ghost. Several of those messages dated to after the ghost's real-world counterpart had died. The arrest came on the morning of June 13, 2023, Tuesday. Federal agents from the FBI's Newark field office, accompanied by investigators from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, arrived at the 11th floor of the Madison Avenue banking tower at 9:14 a.m. They did not enter the lobby quietly. They presented credentials at the security desk. They asked for James Gomes by name. The receptionist on the 11th floor, a woman named Lourdes, who had worked at the branch for 11 years and considered Gomes a friend, walked them to his corner office. Through the glass partition, she could see him at his desk, reviewing a stack of wire confirmation slips, a coffee in his left hand, his right hand poised over a keyboard. He looked up. He saw the men in suits behind her. He saw the third man in a windbreaker with FBI lettering across the chest. The recorded body camera footage captured what came next. Mr. Gomes, Special Agent Ruiz, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have an arrest warrant. Stand up slowly, hands where I can see them. Is this about Edwin? Stand up, sir. Step away from the desk. I want my attorney. That's your right. Stand up first. I can explain the emails. You don't need to explain anything to us. You need to come with us. He stood up. He set the coffee down. The cup left a perfect ring on a stack of papers that would be inventoried as evidence within the hour. He buttoned his suit jacket. He looked across the floor through the glass partition at Lourdes, at the two analysts in the cubicles behind her, at the framed photograph of his children on his credenza. He did not say goodbye. He did not protest. He extended his wrists. The handcuffs went on at 9:19 a.m. He was walked out of the 11th floor in front of every colleague who had ever respected him. The escort took the freight elevator down to a black SUV idling on East 48th Street. The drive to the federal courthouse in Newark took 52 minutes in traffic. He spoke once during the ride. He asked if someone could call his wife. He was indicted by a federal grand jury in the District of New Jersey on June 27, 2023. The indictment listed multiple counts of wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. The maximum exposure on the wire fraud counts alone was 20 years per count. The aggravated identity theft count carried a mandatory consecutive 2-year sentence on top of any base term. His defense attorney was a former federal prosecutor from a midtown firm named David Mercer. Mercer's strategy was triage. The evidence was overwhelming. 47 self-authored emails, override console logs, IP addresses, deposit traces into Gomes's personal accounts. A trial would be a humiliation followed by a maximum sentence. The only path forward was cooperation, restitution, and acceptance. Gomes pleaded guilty on November 14, 2023, to a single count of wire fraud. The aggravated identity theft count was dropped in exchange for the plea, along with the additional wire fraud counts. He agreed to full restitution and forfeiture of the entire $208,938.68. He liquidated a 401k. He sold the BMW. He took out a second mortgage on the Kearney Colonial. His wife liquidated her own retirement account to cover the remaining balance. The sentencing hearing was held on November 7, 2024, before United States District Judge Esther Vargas in Newark. The courtroom was 3/4 full. Gomes's family sat in the second row. His wife, his 2 children, his sister, his brother, his parents. The deceased customer's nephew had flown in from Curitiba. He sat alone on the opposite side of the gallery. The nephew read a victim impact statement. His words, translated from Portuguese by a court interpreter, were entered into the record. My uncle was a quiet man. He did not have many people in his life. But the people he had, he trusted. He trusted this bank for 6 years. He trusted this man. When my uncle died alone in his apartment, this man kept stealing from him. He sent emails pretending to be my uncle. He answered them pretending to be himself. He made my uncle, who could no longer speak words my uncle never said. To me, this is worse than the money. The money is gone. My uncle is gone. But this man took my uncle's voice after my uncle was dead and used it to rob him. Judge Vargas's sentencing statement ran 4 pages in the transcript. She read it without looking up. Mr. Gomez, you held a position of profound trust. You were the human guarantee that this institution's promise to its customers was real. You inverted that promise. You exploited a system of supervision that depended on a basic assumption of professional integrity, and you weaponized that trust against the most isolated and vulnerable client on your book. The aggravating factor in this case is not the dollar amount. The aggravating factor is that you continued the scheme after your victim died. You manufactured a digital impersonation of a dead man. You exchanged emails with him. You attributed to him authorizations he could not possibly have given. The court finds this conduct to be among the most cynical violations of fiduciary duty this court has encountered. She sentenced him to 13 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, full restitution and forfeiture, already paid. He was given 60 days to self-surrender. He reported to Federal Correctional Institution Otisville, a low-security facility in Mount Hope, New York, on January 9, 2025. The drive from Kearney took 2 hours and 10 minutes. His wife drove him. Their children stayed home with his parents. He carried a paper bag with the items he was permitted to bring: a Bible, eyeglasses, a copy of his medical records, his wedding ring, which he was required to surrender at intake. His projected release date is February 2026. His supervised release will run until 2029. His ability to ever work in financial services again is permanently revoked under federal banking statutes. The branch on Madison Avenue continues to operate. His old office has been reassigned to a new branch manager from the bank's São Paulo training program. The corner office still has the same view of Midtown. The mahogany desk is the same. The framed photograph of his children is gone. The bank issued a brief statement after sentencing. It expressed regret, acknowledged the loss to the customer's estate, and noted that the institution had cooperated fully with federal investigators. It did not mention James Gomes by name. In the Ironbound, on Ferry Street, where the grandmothers used to line up at his window to roll over their certificates of deposit, the news traveled the way news travels in immigrant neighborhoods, quietly, over coffee, in Portuguese. The man who had grown up filling out wire transfer slips on a folding chair beside his fisherman father had ended his career inventing emails from a dead man. This case was disturbing, but the case on the right-hand side will leave you genuinely sick to your stomach. Click it now.